Welcome to Objective 5. The first thing we're going to talk about are the fascia layers of the abdominal wall. The first layer is the skin, which is the outermost layer. This is followed by subcutaneous tissue, where inferior to the umbilicus there are two layers, the fatty Camper's fascia and the membranous scarpa fascia. Next is the epimysium, which covers muscles of the abdominal wall and their aponeuroses. And the last layer is the endo-abdominal fascia, which lines internal aspect of the abdominal wall. Next, we're going to talk about the muscle layers of the abdominal wall, starting at the most superficial and going deeper. The first is the external oblique, where the fibers pass inferior medially. Next is the internal oblique, where the fibers fan out. And both the external and internal oblique flex and rotate the trunk. Next is the transverse abdominis, which has horizontal fibers, and the action is to compress and support the abdominal viscera. Lastly is the rectus abdominis, which originates in the pubic symphysis and pubic tubercle, and it inserts at the costal cartilages of ribs 5 and 7 and the xiphoid process. There's also a muscle called the pyramidalis, which is a small triangular muscle. Next is the rectus sheath, which is made up of the aponeuroses of the external oblique, internal oblique, and the transverse abdominis, and there's an anterior and a posterior wall, and the arcuate line is on the posterior wall. Their rectus sheath also contains the rectus abdominis and pyramidalis muscles, as well as the lymphatic vessels and the thoraco-abdominal and subcostal nerves.
Kasey, why can't I get an 8-pack?
Well, Morgan, the reason why you can't get an 8-pack is because above the arcuate line, the three aponeuroses are split, and there are the external and half of the internal aponeuroses are anterior to the rectus abdominis, and then the transverse abdominis and the other half of the internal oblique aponeuroses are below the rectus abdominis. However, below the arcuate line, all three of the aponeuroses are anterior to the rectus abdominis, therefore it is harder to get an 8-pack. Next, we're going to talk about the vasculature of the rectus sheath. So I'm going to start off in the aorta, and it's going to go into the left subclavian artery, then down into the internal thoracic artery, and then that at the sixth intercostal space splits into the musculophrenic artery and then the superior epigastric artery, and the superior epigastric artery goes down into the rectus sheath at the posterior wall, and that is where the anastomosing of the superior and inferior epigastric artery occur, and then that goes into the external iliac artery.